My beloved child, stop scrolling and remain here for a moment, because something happened today that shifted the heart of the person connected to your soul. What you are about to hear did not reach you by accident. There is a reason these words found you now, at this exact moment, while questions have been moving quietly through your mind. Something is waiting to be revealed, and before this message ends, you will understand why your soulmate has been searching for the courage to tell you what happened. Do not rush away. The beginning is only the doorway. What unfolded today may have looked ordinary to everyone else, but heaven saw what it awakened inside them. A single moment forced them to face a feeling they had been avoiding. A truth they had carefully pushed beneath distractions suddenly rose to the surface, and once it appeared, they could no longer pretend it was not there. They thought they could continue through the day without confronting it. They believed they could remain calm, keep their expression steady, and carry on as though nothing had changed. But something did change. Deeply. This morning began like many others. Your soulmate woke with responsibilities waiting, conversations unfinished, and thoughts they did not want to examine too closely. Yet beneath the routine, there was an unusual restlessness. They could not explain it. A familiar place felt different. A familiar sound brought unexpected emotion. Their heart was unsettled before they even understood why. It was as though an invisible hand had gently turned their attention toward something they had refused to see. That something was you. Stay here, because the surprising part is not simply that they thought about you. You have crossed their mind many times before. They have remembered your voice in quiet hours. They have imagined conversations they were too afraid to begin. They have wondered how your presence could still feel close even when distance, silence, uncertainty, or time stood between you. But today was not an ordinary memory. Today, something happened that made them realize the connection was not fading the way they had tried to convince themselves it would. For a while, they had been telling themselves that life would eventually become simple again. They believed that if they remained busy enough, their feelings would become quieter. They thought that if they avoided certain songs, certain places, certain conversations, and certain memories, the ache would pass. They tried to reason with their own heart. They told themselves not to overthink, not to look back, not to imagine possibilities that had not yet become real. But the heart remembers what the mind attempts to bury. Today, they encountered something that carried an unmistakable echo of you. It may have been a sentence spoken by a stranger. It may have been a name that appeared unexpectedly. It may have been a couple laughing together, a message about love, a familiar scent, a place connected to a private memory, or a moment of kindness that reminded them of the way you once made them feel seen. Whatever form it took, it stopped them internally. The world continued moving around them, but for a few seconds, they were no longer fully present in that place. They were with you. In that brief moment, the walls they had built began to crack. Every emotion they had postponed came forward at once. They remembered not only what happened between you, but what could have happened if fear had not interrupted the connection. They remembered what they should have said. They remembered the moment they hesitated. They remembered the times they acted unaffected while secretly hoping you would notice what they could not express. And then came the realization that surprised even them. They did not miss only your presence. They missed the person they became when they felt close to you. Pause here, because this is where the story begins to move into something deeper. Your soulmate has been carrying a private conflict. One part of them wants to approach you honestly. Another part fears that too much time has passed, too much confusion has occurred, or too many unspoken emotions have made the distance impossible to cross. They have rehearsed different versions of the conversation. In one version, they speak with confidence. In another, they become overwhelmed before saying what matters. In another, they imagine you listening silently, and that silence frightens them more than rejection. Yet what happened today changed the balance between fear and truth. They were placed in a situation where someone asked them a question they were not prepared to answer. The question may have sounded simple. It may have been asked casually, without any understanding of how deeply it would reach. But it touched the exact part of them they had hidden. Someone asked what they truly wanted. Someone asked why they seemed distant. Someone noticed that their smile had changed. Someone mentioned relationships, the future, regret, or the kind of person one never forgets. Your soulmate tried to avoid giving a direct answer. They lowered their eyes. They changed the subject. They laughed softly to make the moment feel less serious. But the person speaking to them did not move on immediately. Another question came, and this time, something inside your soulmate could no longer remain silent. They said more than they intended. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. They admitted that there was someone they had not been able to forget. They admitted that a connection still remained in their heart. They may not have spoken your name aloud, but the emotion in their voice revealed that this was not a passing thought. It was not nostalgia. It was not loneliness. It was not the desire for attention. It was something they had been carrying so carefully that even speaking around the truth caused their voice to change. The person listening noticed. Your soulmate attempted to recover. They said it was complicated. They said there were circumstances. They said they did not know what would happen. But beneath those careful words was a confession they could no longer hide from themselves. They still care. They care more than they have allowed anyone to know. Do not leave now, because what happened next is what made today different from every other day. The person listening asked them one final question: what would you say if you had the chance? For a moment, your soulmate said nothing. That silence was not emptiness. It was filled with everything they wished they could tell you. It held the apologies they never formed properly. It held the affection they disguised as distance. It held the nights they almost reached out. It held the moments they looked for signs that you might still care. It held every fear that told them you had already moved on. And then, quietly, they answered. They said they would tell you the truth. They would tell you that their silence never meant you were unimportant. They would tell you that they became distant because the connection was more powerful than they expected. They would tell you that they were afraid of promising something before they felt ready, yet losing you has frightened them even more. They would tell you that they have replayed certain moments repeatedly, wondering whether one different decision could have changed everything. But there was something else they admitted, something they have never said openly before. They would tell you that meeting you altered the standard by which they understand connection. Before you, they thought closeness was something that could be managed. They believed they could control how deeply they cared. They believed that if emotion became inconvenient, they could simply step back and return unchanged. But your presence disturbed that illusion. You reached a place inside them that logic could not command. You made them feel understood in ways they had not expected. Even your silence carried meaning. Even your absence taught them something. Today, they finally recognize that they have been comparing every new interaction to what they felt with you. That truth surprised them. They had tried to be open to other possibilities. They had spoken to people, continued with life, and behaved as though the chapter had closed. Yet every connection felt incomplete because some part of them remained aware of what was missing. They could not reproduce the ease, the intensity, the emotional familiarity, or the strange sense of recognition that existed with you. This does not mean they have understood everything. It does not mean every obstacle has vanished. But today, for the first time, they stopped asking themselves why they could not forget you. They began asking what they were supposed to do about it. Stay till the end, because heaven has been working through a process that neither of you could fully see. There were delays that felt like rejection, but some of those delays were exposing immaturity. There were silences that felt final, but some of those silences were revealing what words had concealed. There were moments when you questioned whether the connection had meaning, yet meaning was being formed in the very places where certainty disappeared. Your soulmate needed to discover the difference between wanting your attention and valuing your heart. They needed to understand the difference between missing comfort and recognizing true connection. They needed to confront the habits that caused them to retreat whenever something became emotionally real. Today, a part of that confrontation happened. After the conversation ended, they were not able to return immediately to their normal state. They kept thinking about the question. What would they say if they had the chance? The answer continued growing inside them. Each hour brought another truth. Each truth made it more difficult to remain silent. At one point, they reached for their phone. Yes, my child, they came closer to contacting you than you know. They opened a screen. They searched for your name, your profile, an old message, or something connected to you. Their hand paused. Their breathing changed. For a moment, they imagined what might happen if they sent the first honest words that entered their heart. They began writing. The message did not start perfectly. They typed a greeting, erased it, and tried again. They wrote that something happened today. They said they had been thinking. They said there was something they wanted to explain. Then they stopped, reread the words, and felt every old fear return. What if you did not answer? What if you answered with distance? What if you had become stronger without them? What if the truth arrived too late? They deleted the message. But the desire to speak did not disappear with the words. Something huge is waiting for you in this revelation, because deleting the message did not bring relief. In the past, retreating had given them a temporary sense of safety. Today, it created pain. The silence that once protected them suddenly felt like a prison. They realized that every unsent message was becoming another brick in the wall between you. They put the phone down, but they could not put the feeling down. They walked away from it. They attempted to focus. They answered other people. They completed tasks. Yet internally, the conversation with you had already begun. They imagined telling you about today. They imagined explaining why it affected them. They imagined admitting that they had spoken about you to someone for the first time with more honesty than they intended. And then another unexpected moment occurred. They received a sign that felt too precise to ignore. Perhaps your name appeared. Perhaps a phrase you once used was spoken nearby. Perhaps a song connected to your memory began playing at the exact moment they were trying to dismiss the feeling. Perhaps they saw a number, an image, a place, or a symbol that carried private meaning. The form matters less than the impact. Your soulmate stopped again, and this time, they did not immediately explain it away. They whispered to themselves, "Why today?" That question opened something. Why today, after so much avoidance? Why today, after trying to move forward? Why today, after deciding they would not reopen what had become emotionally complicated? Because today was the day their denial became heavier than their truth. Heaven did not force them. Heaven illuminated them. The light fell upon what had already been living in their heart. They were shown that avoidance had not removed the connection. It had only delayed the moment of honesty. And now they want to tell you. Not because everything is suddenly simple. Not because they have perfected the words. Not because they are certain how you will respond. They want to tell you because they are beginning to understand that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing truth while fear is still present. Do not skip what comes next, because there is a part of their experience today that they have not yet fully understood. When they thought about speaking to you, their first impulse was to explain themselves. They wanted to tell you why they acted the way they did. They wanted you to understand their confusion, their hesitation, and the pressure they were under. But then a deeper truth entered their heart. This cannot be only about being understood. They must also understand what their choices caused inside you. That realization was painful. For the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine how their silence may have felt from your side. They considered the questions you may have carried. They wondered whether you blamed yourself. They thought about the moments you may have waited for clarity and received none. They understood that while they were protecting themselves from emotional vulnerability, you may have been left alone with uncertainty. Something softened in them. They did not become defensive. They did not make excuses. They did not say, "I did the best I could," and end the reflection there. Instead, they felt genuine sorrow. Not the kind that seeks immediate forgiveness, but the kind that recognizes another person's heart as something sacred. They wished they could return to one particular moment. There was a moment when you gave them an opening. Perhaps it was through a question, a look, a message, or your quiet willingness to remain present. You gave them a chance to step closer. They sensed it, but they hesitated. They told themselves there would be another time. Today, they realized how much that moment mattered. They remembered your energy changing after that. They remembered something becoming less open. They remembered the subtle shift they once ignored. Now they understand that hearts do not always close dramatically. Sometimes they close quietly after waiting too long for honesty. The thought shook them. But my child, this message is not arriving to reopen your wounds. It is arriving to reveal movement where you believed there was only stillness. You have not seen the private work taking place within them. You have not heard the conversations they have had with themselves. You have not witnessed the nights when their certainty collapsed and their true feelings emerged. You saw their distance. Heaven saw their conflict. You saw the silence. Heaven heard the words they were afraid to speak. You saw no movement. Heaven saw the moment today when they finally admitted that remaining silent may cost them something they cannot replace. They now understand that you are not waiting to be impressed by promises. You are not waiting for dramatic words without action. You are not waiting for someone to return only because they feel lonely. If they approach you, they must come with sincerity. They must come with accountability. They must come prepared to speak in a way that brings clarity instead of more confusion. That understanding is why the message was deleted. You may think fear alone stopped them, but there was another reason. They knew the first words were not enough. They knew they could not simply say, "I miss you," and expect the past to disappear. They knew that what they truly needed to tell you was larger than a sudden emotional message. They needed to tell you what happened today. They needed to tell you what was said. They needed to tell you what they realized. And most of all, they needed to tell you about the decision that began forming afterward. Stay here. This decision is the reason the energy around your connection feels different. After deleting the message, they spent time alone. In that quiet, they made an internal promise. They promised themselves that they would no longer use confusion as an excuse for silence. They promised that before making any move, they would become honest about what they were actually willing to do. They did not want to approach you with half a heart, temporary emotion, or words that would fade when fear returned. They asked themselves whether they were ready to change. Not whether they were ready to feel. They already feel. Not whether they were ready to miss you. They already do. They asked whether they were ready to become the kind of person who could protect the connection instead of retreating from it. That question remains open. But their answer is beginning to become clear. There is a powerful difference between loving the idea of someone and choosing the responsibility of loving them honestly. Today, your soulmate began to understand that difference. They saw that connection is not maintained through unspoken longing. It is built through consistency, communication, patience, and the willingness to remain present when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. You awakened this lesson in them without forcing it. Your absence became a mirror. Your silence became a boundary. Your growth became a message. They have noticed something changing in you, even from a distance. They sense that you are no longer standing in the same emotional place. They feel that you have become more aware of your worth. They sense that the version of you who once waited without limits is becoming someone who requires truth. This both frightens and inspires them. It frightens them because they know they may not have unlimited time. It inspires them because they know you deserve a version of them that no longer hides. Something happened today, my child. Something simple on the surface and life-changing underneath. Your soulmate was confronted with the possibility that one day they could look back and realize they lost a rare connection, not because love was absent, but because courage was. That possibility brought them close to tears. They did not necessarily cry where anyone could see. They may have held the emotion behind controlled breathing and a quiet expression. But inside, something broke open. They felt the weight of every delay. They felt the fear of hearing that you no longer needed the truth they had taken so long to offer. Then, in the middle of that emotion, a new thought arrived. What if you still feel it too? They have wondered before, but today the question carried urgency. They remembered certain signs. They remembered moments when your energy revealed more than your words. They remembered the way you once looked at them, listened to them, or offered understanding they had not earned yet. They wondered whether some thread still exists between you. They do not know the answer. That uncertainty is now pushing them toward honesty rather than retreat. Do not misunderstand this message as a promise that another person controls your future. Your worth has never depended on whether they speak. Your destiny has never been suspended by their delay. Heaven has been strengthening you not to make you wait forever, but to